Hey everyone, welcome to Grab Your Keys. I am super excited to have a special guest. He is a host of the Number One Lender podcast, and I could not be more tickled to have him on Grab Your Keys today, Steve Kiles. So Steve, thanks for being on with us today. We were able to get to see each other a month ago, and I said, will you be on Grab Your Keys? And you were so gracious and said that you would impart your great knowledge on our guests.
Come on.
Our
I'm excited to be with you, Sue. Thank you for the invitation. And just a great group, and excited to be on your podcast and to be a part of your story. And man, you make such a big impact in the families and the lives that you come in contact with. And I'm just excited to be here. So
we are excited to have you because I want to ask you a couple of great questions. Like number one, how did you get into the mortgage industry?
Oh, wow. My good. Okay. So we're going back. I got to
tell you,
we're going back 21 years. I've been in the mortgage space. And so, okay. So here's the thing. I've been a musician since I was 15, and I loved music and played at a high level for a long time. And then in my early 20s, I took a position at a church here, actually locally in Houston, and a large church, and just started playing music. Well, then I got married. And Sue, the funny thing is, my wife was like, we cannot be married and you playing music 5 nights a week. And so I was like, all right, I got to find something real to do. And for me personally, I was really just praying about it. And what am I supposed to do with the rest of my life? And what's something that I felt like I could lean into, that I'm passionate about, that would make an impact? And for me, it was mortgages. And I just remember praying, and man, from my story, it was like, I just knew there's 2 things I've known in my life I was supposed to do. Number one, marry my wife. We've been married 21 years. Just an amazing relationship. The second thing was to get in the mortgage business. And Sue, the funny thing is, I didn't even know that you spelled mortgage with 2 G's.
Me either, or T's.
Yeah, I had no idea. And so I was just, really just seeking what to do. And, for me personally, at that point, I was a 6-year college dropout. I was a professional musician, newly married. I could go back to school, or I could get into business. Always had been entrepreneurial. When we were 15, started a t-shirt company, a gold plating company, bought and sold real estate. We bought our first investment property when we were like 19 years old. And I loved the real estate space. And I'll tell you what really kind of leaned me into it. When we were buying our investment properties, the toughest part of the process was anytime we wanted to work with a bank or a mortgage at that time. And I just realized, man, there's a huge opportunity to help people. It's got to be easier than that. And I happened to know somebody who was in the mortgage business, and I asked him to train me. And I had to pursue him for months because he said originally no. And I'll tell you this, it's 100% commission. So I went and I literally worked for free for him. His name was Marcus. And I'd go into the office, leave here at 7, get there at 8, work till about 1 or 2, and then I'd go wait tables at night. And I did that for the first 9 months until I began to get acclimated into mortgages. And, it was, it's been a career that has no ceiling, amazing impact. And I always tell people this: when you find your calling and what you're really good at and passionate about, it just is such a fun way to live life, because you don't wake up and say, which I know you found this, Sue, we don't wake up and say, man, I got a job. It's what can we do today to have an even bigger impact? And Sue, that's really what it is. Whatever your widget, whatever your tool, whatever you do for a living, it's, can we make an even bigger impact on the lives and the families we serve? And for us, we just get the privilege to do mortgages, and it's been a lot of fun, and we've learned a lot. It's been a fun 21 years. Most of them, I think 19 have been great. Like a couple of them have been a little bit of a challenge.
Some of them. And I have what instrument did you play, or do you play?
A bunch. I started on bass. Yeah, I started playing bass. And then when you play bass, I started to learn piano because, I would watch the guy I was playing with him and where his left hand was going. So I started in bass, piano, and probably my best instrument's acoustic guitar. And so, yeah.
Well, that's fun. That's an interesting fact about Steve Kiles.
Yeah.
So wow.
Not as many people know that, but yeah, I've been playing. Hey, I'll tell you a funnier story too. I was 15 years old. I went on my very first mission trip to Honduras, and we were helping orphans in the Honduran mountains. And I found a street guitar, and I paid, all I had was like $150 in spending money for the whole month. And I used it all to buy a cheap guitar. And that's how I learned how to play music. I would play on it, and man, I just loved it. It was always a refuge, always a very special place to go and play music, just in my personal life. And then that turned into something professional for many years.
Yeah, that's great. I love music. I don't play any
Yeah,
instruments. I love
but you love it.
I love it. I
Yeah.
find that it's a great outlet. And it's funny, it's not really funny. My daughter was born hearing impaired, so she has a cochlear implant. And I would listen to her as she's been growing up. She's 20 now. And I would love to hear her singing in the different tones of singing, because most people who are hearing impaired and have a cochlear implant don't have that tone, that they hear differently. And I always was like, oh my gosh, she can sing, she hears the music. That was and it was just great, because I feel like it's such an outlet for people to find joy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we find joy when we go to church, singing, at different masses and at different services. So I think that that's great, especially this time of year.
Yeah.
What do you feel your 3 keys to success have been for you?
Oh, wow. The first thing I thought was consistency. I think, if I were to say consistency, hey, I'm going to write them down. Consistency. I would also say this: the ability to evaluate after action's been taken. And the third thing is to implement fast. Evaluate. What I mean by that is here. So I'll go back to them. So when you ask me that, first thing is consistency. Like, we were talking about the podcast earlier, which I love. I'm still podcasting now, and we've got a ton of just great things. I'll never forget when I started that almost 4.5 years ago. Here, when you're consistent in something over time, you can get better. The challenge for most of us is we'll start something, we don't see immediate results, and then we stop because we say it didn't work. Right. Hey, Sue, I heard something the other day, and I thought this is exactly what consistency is. I was listening to an influencer. He helps people grow their audiences. And he was talking about, I get asked all the time, how do you get to 100,000 subscribers on social or media or whatever you're trying to get people to follow, whether it's YouTube or things like that? And they'd say, how much time does it take? Take a year, 2 years, 6 months? And he said, I get asked that a lot. And Sue, here's what he said. He said, but what we have found is this: it's not the time, it's the reps. He said, when somebody's posted their 1,000th video is typically when they're hitting 100,000 subscribers. And it was so profound, because I know we don't move in the digital space. We're not, social media accounts for 3% of our business. Right. But I really, when he said that, I thought, man, it goes back to anything that you do, whether it's learning a new job, whether it's podcasting, whether it's video marketing, whether it's being a parent, whether it's learning how to convert more of the business you've got. It's not time, it's really reps. And the reps come from being consistent. And let me give you an example. I think we talked about this at the event we were at a few months ago. The first year I was podcasting, like we get now in a day how many downloads I got the first full year.
Right.
And I think it goes back to when you set your mind to something, the number one key is, okay, I'm going to be consistent. And here's what I told myself: I'm going to do it 1 a week for the first year if it kills me. And then you just do it messy. I remember the first episodes were awful. The sound was awful. There was no video. But then what I did was every week it was like, okay, can I do one thing better? Can I do one thing better? Is there one thing we can get better? And the consistency. And here's, I think, the number 2 part of success is evaluating each week. Hey, what did I say that really impacted somebody? Like, what I'm known for in our industry is really scripting and structure. And people are like, you're so good with your words. But it was really because after being consistently saying the same thing, I would evaluate what result did I get. and either pivot or continue based on the result. So number one, it's do it consistent. Number two, it's evaluate the result. Hey, and one thing that really has helped me too is when you're evaluating results, when things don't happen the way you think they should, I always say this, you can get bitter or you can get better. And I've always leaned more towards the better. Look, that call didn't go the way I thought it should. That client left me when I've invested so many hours with them. That agent relationship didn't work out, or insert in whatever it is. When you evaluate the results, staying consistent to the activity, you can pivot so that you end up getting the right results. And I think the third thing is just implement fast. If you want to get started, I heard something today. I was on a call and I thought this was so good. I wrote it down. I was sharing it with all of our team today. This is, to me, what speaks about implementation. Clarity comes in action. And so whenever I think about implementing, I think about it's the ready, fire, aim. Like too many of us sit back and say, when I've got my podcasting equipment perfect, or when I've got my script dialed in, or I got my list just right, I'll take action. And part of success is be consistent, evaluate, and just shoot. And then whenever it misses the target, and let everybody off the hook, you're going to miss the target. Probably the first 10 or 15 times. It's not about that. It's kind of just take action. And in taking action, you'll get more and more clear about what it is to do. If you don't get bitter because the result wasn't what you wanted, but you get better. I say it all the time on the podcast. Anything worth doing is worth doing badly. Just get started. And action's a key to success.
Right. I think that trying to be perfect hurts a lot of people, because there is no such thing as perfection.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I love how you say consistency, ability to evaluate, and then implement fast, because if you are constantly evaluating, whether you implement when you implement fast, it allows you to go back to evaluate and then pivot. And that pivoting can be a pivotal moment when you realize that what you're doing isn't right, or needs to be tweaked, and you allow yourself to be better educated and to do better. And that's what I love. That's what I love. And I remember the first time I met you, Steve. You might not remember the first time you met me, but I met you at a boot camp in Clearwater.
I think it was about 3 years ago.
I think it was one of the first boot camps I went to, and I was like, wow, he's so positive. And so but I think one of the things that you're positive about is that you always have to practice. That's your consistency. You're great at scripting, but you're great at scripting because you're practicing it.
Yeah.
And you have a consistency of doing it, but you're constantly tweaking things, evaluating it, but you're not scared that it has to be perfect. You're still going out there and doing it. And that's what I thought was so great about you when I first met you, is I was like, he's just putting it all out there. Like in his positivity, he knows he can fix it if he has to. But you don't even have to, because if you're positive and you're doing it, you'll see results.
Yeah. Hey, well, Sue, and thank you for that. I think, what helps when you're around great people like yourself, and you realize, what, and also you don't take ourselves so serious. It's like, Sue, it's not going to come out great. It's not going to be perfect. You know where that comes from? When I was really evaluating, it was funny. I was doing an event and I thought it was for public speaking, and and it's a 2 or 3 day event. And really, it was so crazy. I came out of that event really recognizing the negative tapes that I had. And the negative tape, you know where it came from, Sue? And I would hear people in and around my life say, hey, anything we're doing, Steve, just do it right. Man, if you're going to do it right. And it's been so ingrained because the previous generation, that sounds like a good something to say. But really what it does is it instills a fear of perfection, which is, hey, listen, anything we're doing is worth doing badly. Like, it's going to be messy. You're like, the first time you ever made a phone call, how good was it? The first time I ever, I remember answering the phones. I started kind of in a clerical area. Like, Marcus brought me on, but I was answering the phone. First time I'm like, what do I say? How do I say it? Oh my gosh, that was awful. They almost hung up on me. And it's the not taking yourself seriously. And remember this, when you love people and when you're focused on making a difference, kindness wins over perfection all day long. And it's like, look, smile, let them hear. We used to tell each other all the time, let them hear your smile over
Yes.
the phone.
Then you can see it.
Yeah.
Hear it.
And that's where it's, because when I'm smiling and I'm loving people and I'm making a difference, yeah, we're going to fumble around. So just be consistent, evaluate what you did, and then make sure that you're implementing a new way to do it even better. But when you're around people that are great like you are, iron sharpens iron. And I see you and it's like, wow, Sue did it this way. And then there's this reciprocating of, well, man, if she can do it, then I can do it. And it's, nobody's got a magic bullet. It's just about taking the action and understanding, man, James Clear in his book, Atomic Habits, said,
I love that book.
That's great. And this was profound. He said, get 1% better. Yeah. I don't even have to get 10, just get 1. And so every day, what's the one thing I learned from yesterday? Carl White said something this last week, and it really impacted me. He said, what did you learn from the last 12 months? And his second question was, what are you going to do differently the next 12 months? So that what? So that what? So that what? And I got to tell you, when you live life saying, not even what did I do, or what would I do differently in the last 12 months? What would I do differently from yesterday? What would I do differently from Friday? Hey, from this morning, what would I do differently? Looking back, and then, okay, what am I going to do differently now that I know that? And you just keep taking action and get 1% better. And I think that that's where we put too much emphasis on rising stars. Like, hey, they're an overnight success. There ain't nobody an overnight success.
Yeah, no.
They've been doing it underground, quietly in the shadows for years. And all of a sudden, somebody put a spotlight on the act they've been doing for years that's compounding results.
Yeah, so true. So who does Steve Kiles admire?
Oh, man. A lot of people. I'll tell you this. I really glean from, man, it's the people in my life. It's who do I admire? Man, it starts close. I admire my wife. I just knowing it would, Sue, what you as women do for our homes. I admire my twin brother, who's a phenomenal pastor. I admire Carl White in his ability to sell and lead people in a very simple way. I can go down a list of people who I admire.
Yeah. I think that it's so important to admire people and have mentors.
Yeah.
That you can. I always say that I admire my dad because he's an attorney, and he always says, like, he wakes up every day to practice.
Yeah.
He practices being a dad. He practices being a grandfather. He practices being a lawyer. And that's just what he practices. And that's why they say, I'm a practicing attorney. I'm a practicing doctor, because they are just practicing their profession. And so I think the more people you admire and the more people that are mentors for you, the more you can blossom, because you're only as good as the 10 people that are the closest people around you.
Yeah.
And if you fill that area with like such a great people who want to pour into you, then you can pour into others.
Yeah.
And that's what I love. That's what I love about success. That's what I love about working with everybody, as we all share and we all pour into each other. No one's doing better than anybody else. We're just trying to raise everyone to that level.
Sue, and I'll tell you what, it's, I think of life as a collaboration. You can learn from everyone. Like when you say admire and admiration, what I'm thinking about are the qualities and traits. Like, I'll give you an example. My son, Ethan, he's 11, and I really admire his trait. He's so disciplined. Like, if he's got a project due in 2 weeks, he's working on it this week and perfecting it the week before. Like, if I had his discipline when I was 11, man. And so I look at it and I'm like, okay, Steve, when I see that trait in someone like Ethan, even though he's 11 years old, what can I, and it goes back to the evaluating. Number 2, it's what can I do differently to be better prepared for the things I'm showing up in life? When I think about Steph, my wife, that girl is an action taker. Like, she's not hey, let me think about it. She's a ready, fire, aim.
Right.
And I admire the fact that she takes massive action whether it's in like we just now are selling one of the houses we just had, and the amount of what she didn't even think about it. She just gets up and just pounds the day and doesn't ever complain about it, but just says, I got it done. I think about my son, Lucas, he's 8. That is the sweetest, most gentlest spirit. That kid is always looking for a way to help. And I look at him and I say, man, what can I do to add more value? Because like every time I go to do something, he's like, hey, Dad, what can I do to help you? And then even further than that, he'll just start doing something to help even before he has to ask me. And I think that's an admirable trait.
It's a beautiful thing. I mean, you have
Yeah.
an 8-year-old and 11-year-old. That's
Yeah.
you have 2 or 3.
Yeah, 3. And then I got a
Right.
6-year-old. She's
6.
a firecracker.
Yeah. So it's great when we see those fabulous traits in our children that we're
Yeah.
so super proud of. I mean, I had said that Allison, my daughter, was born hearing impaired. With the things that she's had to deal with in her life, and now she's a sophomore in college. I'm blown away. Like, she thinks she's totally normal, and she is. Like, she thinks that everyone has a cochlear implant practically. So, like, why are you worried about that, Mom? And so she just takes it on the chin, where I don't know that I could have actually taken it on the chin as much. So we pour so much into our kids, and then to see their traits come to life is like such a beautiful thing. And during this holiday season, I think that, it's magical. We're all like just really loving on our children and loving on our families. I love, that Steph like gets up and just does it. And that, fills you at the same time, which is so great, because family is ultimately why we're doing this for everyone.
100%.
And why we have the work ethic we have, and why we're out there serving others so that we can serve our own families. So, well, Steve, the last question I have for you in this last 4 minutes we have is, what's in the future for Steve? Like, where do we see you? Where do we find you? How can we, help Steve out in the future?
Well, hey, I tell you, I think, that's a great question. I think for me, it's, what these next 12 months are, it's focusing on what I'm the best at, and learning how to say no to more and more things. I think as you begin to see success in your life and in our listeners' lives, the hardest thing is there's a lot more yeses that come up. And the challenge to massive success, in my opinion, are 2 things: good versus being the best. And number 2 is saying yes to things we should have said no to. And that's a real hard thing, because a lot of people will pull you, whether it's in your personal life and your professional life. And what I would challenge our listeners to is, what are the things you can say no to, so that you focus on what you're the best at, what you love to do, and what makes you the most money. One of the books I've been challenged by recently is called 10X is Easier Than 2X by Dan Kennedy and Ben Hardy. And, it's a real difference in thinking, and it's saying, okay, where do you want to be in the next 12 months? And what if you could 10X what you thought you could do? Most of us are trying to grow 10 and 20%. What if you took your next year's goals and 10 times it? It's a different way of thinking. So the thought process is, if I grow 20%, I can usually work more. And my challenge to our listeners is, when you 10X what your next 12 months are, you typically can't work more. It requires a different level of thinking. And oftentimes it's, who can do that? Who can I add to the team to do that? Or what am I doing that I need to stop doing? Or what am I not doing that I need to start doing? Remembering 20% of your activity produces 80% of your results. And it's hard to say no, because we get intoxicated with busy and not effective. And so the next 12 months for us are really saying, okay, what do we need to say no to? How do we stay focused on what is the biggest 20% that gives us the 80% of the results? Because in getting bigger results, we make a bigger impact. And I think that that's really where we're focused. That's what I'm focused on. And for our listeners, man, you'd be surprised also, you get time freedom when you do that, because you can't thrive without margin. And most of us are so busy There's no margin. There's no thinking time. There's no strategy time. There's no, look, I can't grow 10x doing the same thing I've always done. So what is it going to take for us to hit 10x results in the next 12 months?
Yes, and I totally agree with you. Need to put into your Outlook calendar thinking time, strategy time. You and I have gotten where we are because we are the thinkers, and to delegate and to say no. It's hard. I'm a pleaser. I want to please everybody. I know that that's a positive and a negative for me. So I think it's super important to put the people in your lives who will do things the way you want them done so that you don't have to do it. So that you're able to like go. I was able to go and be in Maryland last week because I had a team here that was able to be at an event that I wanted to be at too. I was like, how can I split myself in 3 different parts? But it was because you have to sometimes not be there, and sometimes it has to just represent you. So I love what you just said about that. That's amazing. And for our listeners, we're so super happy that you said yes to us and didn't say no, Steve. So I'm so blessed to have you as a peer and as a friend of mine. I every day am super blessed about that. So, if you ever need anything, you can always give me a telephone call. But our listeners are super excited. And guys, if you have a podcast, you should definitely listen to Steve's podcast. It's amazing. He is off the charts with tons of nuggets. Every single time I listen, I walk away with great nuggets, and we appreciate you being on our show. So thank you so much, Steve. Everybody, like and share if you thought you found value and think a friend could learn value from this. It was super great. And we have great people coming on in the future. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on Grab Your Keys.
See you.